Hi guys, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about analyzing equations of lines. And the I can statement we're working on is I can find the slope, y-intercept, and correlation or trend from an equation. So let's begin by looking at some very familiar equations. Now in the last video, we already talked about how we could find the y-intercept where it crosses the y-axis, the slope, which was our rise over run, and the trend or correlation, which is when I read the graph from left to right, is my line increasing or is it decreasing? And today we're going to look at the equations and how can I find all three of those descriptors from looking at the equation. So these equations are written in a form commonly known as slope-intercept form. This is where we take y equally and make it equal to a number being multiplied by x plus or minus a number. And so you'll hear y equals mx plus b is a very common mathematical phrase you'll hear to describe slope-intercept form. M, in this case, the number being multiplied by x, represents our slope, and b, the number being added, or it could also be subtracted from the x term, is our y-intercept. So when I'm looking at an equation, I can find the slope and y-intercept very quickly by the placement in the equation. So let's look at these equations that we looked at earlier in this task. So y equals 2x plus 3. 2 is in the place of the m. 2 is my slope. And we looked at that when we looked at the graph. Every time I plotted a new point, I went up 2 over 1. So 2 represents how much I went up. The denominator of this whole number is 1, so up 2 over 1, my slope is 2. My y-intercept is positive 3, and we're going to write that as an ordered pair, 0, 3. Now, if I were to be subtracting 3 from my x term, my y-intercept would be 0, negative 3. Now, the correlation, that is the only thing that's a little trickier to find. To find the correlation or trend of my line, I am going to look at the slope. If the slope is positive, then my correlation is positive. Over here, my slope is negative 2. Because that slope is negative, my trend is going to be negative. My slope is going to be negative 2, and my y-intercept is going to be positive 3 or 0, 3. Now, sometimes you're not going to be given, let's look at one more equation. If I had y equals negative 10x minus 5, I can say my slope is negative 10 because that's the number being multiplied by x. My y-intercept, it's going to cross the y-axis at 0, negative 5. And my correlation or trend is going to be negative because the number being multiplied by x is negative. Now, sometimes you won't be given a line in slope-intercept form. You might be given the line in standard form, ax plus by equals c. In this case, you might need to do a little manipulation to find the slope, the y-intercept, and the correlation. Do you remember when we were solving equations? Well, we're going to do the same thing with with our standard form to turn it into slope-intercept form. I want to isolate the y, which means I got to get rid of everything else that isn't y. So let's start with this equation here. I have this y term. I need to get rid of it eventually. But first I'm going to subtract my x term. Now, that leaves me with negative 2y here equals negative 3x plus 5. Now I need to get y alone. So I'm going to divide both sides by -2. Now, when I divide these two terms by -2, I'm going to really use the distributive property. I'm going to divide each term individually by -2. So I'm going to get, on the left, y equals -3 divided by -2. Remember when I said you can go ahead and leave your fractions as fractions and your improper fractions in improper fraction form? We're going to do that here. What is -3 divided by -2? Well, that's going to be a positive 3 over 2x. There's my slope. And 5 divided by -2 is going to be -2.5. Okay, so when I want to find my slope is 3 over 2. My y-intercept is going to be 0, -2.5. And because my slope is positive, my correlation is also going to be positive. Let's look at this next one. We want to isolate the y. So we want to get rid of this x term first. So let's add 2x to both sides. That's going to leave me with 3y over here equals 2x minus 11. I'm going to divide everything by 3. I'm going to be left with y equals 2/3 x minus 3 goes into 11. 3 times 3 2/3. So my slope is 2/3. My y-intercept is going to be 0, 3 2/3, sorry, -3 2/3. And because my slope is positive, my correlation is also going to be positive. We're done with this video. You can go back and watch any part as many times as you need, but don't go ahead and complete section 2 of our observation recording sheet.